My creative friends. This is Dr. Minette Riordan. It is 7 a.m. Mountain Time in Loveland, Colorado, and it's 41 degrees this morning, which feels like good news. Things are warming up. My hair is definitely a little on the crazy side, and I almost don't need my flannel pajamas anymore. But welcome. So, this is Painting in Your PJs live with Minette, where we talk about all things life, love, art, things that we can use to create beautiful visual journaling pages that are both appealing to the eye and to our heart, that help us open up and explore different aspects of ourselves. So, in my own personal work, I am an artist, I am an expressive arts facilitator, and I love working with individuals and groups around just getting to know ourselves. And I find so often that, good morning, Judy, that when we hit midlife, that we start to question our identity again, almost like we did in our 20s and then maybe in our 30s or 40s. But there seems to be these sort of different moments and times in our lives where we lose touch with ourselves and lose touch with our own voice. And so I want to explore this idea of voice through image today and connecting to identity on the page. So that's kind of the direction that we're going. If you're here watching live, welcome, welcome. I love having you. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much. Always appreciate a like on the video, and don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified when I do go live Monday to Thursday and some Fridays at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen here, and I've got all kinds of things that I'm thinking about. I was just sitting flipping through some images. Good morning, Blanca, and looking at the different things that I had on my table and my box of collage materials. So this piece of burlap was left over from my found objects from when I was recording my found objects class. This made the most beautiful texture and created a gorgeous stamp for working on paper. You can see the link to my found objects class in the comments. But I was more drawn to the texture this morning, and I cut out this lion. So a friend of mine was telling me about her son who is dyslexic, and they found this amazing book, this children's book called Be the Dragon. And one of the sections in the book about the dragon was about finding your roar. Because, of course, I had to buy the book. I love children's books. And it made me think about when we lose touch with our own sense of identity, that what we've lost connection to is our roar, our lion's roar, our dragon's roar. We've lost connection to our voice, and that we have to go on a creative journey into the center of a labyrinth, maybe to find that voice. Good morning, Yvonne. So at I can't remember if it was in a little library or the 25-cent bookstore, I found a book full of all these different labyrinths, and this one has the Minotaur sitting in the center. But I really love this idea of the labyrinth in relationship to our own sort of personal quest for identity. So I'm starting to see these two pages come together kind of interestingly with some collage images and wanting, because I added the burlap, to maybe stitch some of these things together and add them to the page. So I have some ideas, but I'm exploring this idea of finding my roar. And do I find that when I spiral into the center of myself and then I bring that back out? I love labyrinths and the whole concept of the quest that we go on as we circle deeper and deeper into connection and knowing of our own inner spirits. But where I wanted to start, I think, was with this lion and this burlap, and maybe putting these together with a little bit of slow stitching. I have these ancient needles. I have a lot of old sewing supplies from my stepmom and her mom when she passed away, and boxes full of thread and different embroidery patterns and things. And I love incorporating and using some of these really old things in my journals. So I'm just gonna, so I have a needle and some embroidery floss here. And I love stitching on paper, and I love incorporating stitching. If I can find an end to this messy thing, I love incorporating stitching into my journals. I love anything that really adds texture. But the other reason that I love adding stitching, should have grabbed my, I have scissors that I keep, thank you, Yvonne, that I keep completely separate from anywhere near my paint and my matte medium and my paper that are only used for fabric and thread. And I am gonna, do I want to split this? No, I think I don't want to split it. All right, let's see how good I am at threading a needle at 7 a.m. in the morning. But what I love about the process of slow stitching and adding slow stitching to my journal, it's another way of slowing down. Good morning, Georgia. Georgia needs to come say hello this morning. It's another way of slowing down and being with my thoughts and my work on the page in a little bit different way. So I got one cat in my lap, one cat trying to climb around the back of my computer. They're so helpful. But I think when we can really slow down and just enjoy the page, it's the same reason why I love our Mindful Patterns membership and our Sacred Circles practice of mindful coloring, because they're all things that get me to slow down. And I'm just tacking these on with just a little bit of glue stick, just make it a little bit easier to stitch. I love the look on this lion's face as he's roaring. And this brings back an amazing memory. And this is what I love about the process, is that you never know what kind of rabbit hole your visual journaling process is going to take you down. And one time when the kids were little, Connor was, I don't know, Maggie was born, so Connor then was maybe 4 or 5, and we were at the zoo in San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, so it's one of my favorite places. I love the zoo there. This burlap's pretty easy to stitch through, so I'm just going to do a really fast running stitch and stitch this paper napkin on here, and I'm going to do it kind of carefully because it's kind of fragile. You're not going to see that white thread on there, but I can see the texture on there. But I'm also going to do some stitching around the napkin, but I want to get that napkin attached. And San Antonio has a really nice zoo, not as nice as San Diego, but they've really worked over the years to modernize it and rewild it a little bit. And we were standing in front of the lion exhibit, and there was a big, huge male lion lying on a rock, just kind of half sleepy, watching everyone walking around. And my little 4-year-old son, 5-year-old son roared as loud as he could at the lion. And wouldn't you know it, that lion roared right back at my son. And it was the most amazing experience, and to see the look of awe on my son's face when he heard that lion's roar. It's an amazing, amazing memory. And I've always loved animals, and I have mixed feelings about zoos, but I'm also grateful that we do get to have an opportunity to just see animals that otherwise we'd never get a chance to see. And I think I have more compassion and care for animals because of that. Can you see this paw, this silly girl? So she is chasing, hey you, chasing the embroidery thread. So helpful. I love that story too. And I know, it's an experience that certainly I'll never forget and that Connor will never forget. All right, Georgia, off you go, darling. And when I think about male lions, there's a lot of symbolism around their courage and their strength, but it's actually the females who are the hunters in the pride and are often the ones that are out catching the food. Yes, she is so playful. I can't let her anywhere near me when I'm slow stitching. All right. So I'm going to just do a little stitching to attach the lion here. And again, what I love about this stitching, it's just like mark making. It's another way to be here, to be mindful, to get my own hand into my work. The more that I can add the original marks on there, and stitching is like adding our own mark to the page. It's just a different way. Letting this be kind of messy and quick. Before I sort of relearned how much I love to draw and paint, I did a lot of different creative things over the years. And in high school, my stepmom taught me how to make stained glass, and that was super fun. I went through a phase of loving pastels and doing a lot of work with pastels. And I went through a long embroidery needlepoint phase. And for me, once I discovered Zentangle, it sort of replaced my love of needlepoint because it's that similar sort of just mindful presence. And needlepoint, you didn't have to think a lot about it. It was just needle in, needle out. So many beautiful patterns and colors. In fact, my mom still has one hanging in her guest room that I made years and years ago. So again, just letting this be kind of messy, not worrying too much about what it's going to look like. The paper's a little bit fragile, so you can't get too close to the edges of the paper with the magazine images. So I really am just sort of tacking this down on here, and you can see it's messy, but I still have my lion, and I love the way this looks. And so, maybe I'm going to go continue the whole lion, and I may not sit here and stitch this entire thing. We'll see where we get to. Does anyone else love slow stitching? And so when I say slow stitching, what I mean by that is it's a relatively new trend over the last couple of years. There's a lot of different versions of it, but it's a very abstract form for the most part of stitching. So I wouldn't call it embroidery. It's not patterned based. There's some beautiful Japanese methods and styles of stitching and the art of repair. Sashiko is one of those. I bought a beautiful book on that, but I tend to really love the just sort of grabbing a couple of pieces of fabric and putting them together and using some seed stitches or sometimes a little applique. And I think that we forget that we can combine so many of our loves together into journaling that we don't have to keep all these things separate. I even ended up buying a sewing machine last summer so that I could stitch on paper. I don't know how to sew very well. I don't really, I don't have any desire to make things, but I love using that sewing machine to stitch pages together or to just add some texture. Okay, I'm about out of thread here. So I got almost all the way around that piece, and that's kind of fine. I love the little messy look. Might be fun to come back and do the rest of the lion, but I might not need to. It's interesting that almost looks like he's kind of maybe trapped a little bit here. So I might want to add those stitches or even some faux stitches with white lines around the edges to, yeah, adding paint to make it look like a stitch is a great idea, right? I could do that with, I could just come in here and, continue that look with a white Posca. But all you need is a needle, some embroidery thread, and some just scraps of fabric, right? So you can use old clothes that you're going to recycle are a great thing to use. I often will go to like Joann's or Walmart and just get the little, small pieces of fabric like the quilting squares. Look at thrift stores. I bought some, recently bought some fun old shirts with old patterns on them. I'm wondering if this Posca will write on there. It writes a little bit. It's interesting. Doesn't the tissue in the napkin is super absorbent, so that white isn't going to be vibrant. But again, thinking of all the fun things that I can do with this to just kind of continue to make things my own. And if you are on Instagram or even on YouTube and just do a search for slow stitching, you will find some really, really amazing examples. And I'm wanting this to have a little bit more color and maybe a little bit of stitching around the edge as well. And I might even want to stitch that right onto this page, but I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to set this aside for a minute. It definitely is calling for some more thread, maybe just some framing around the edges. So we're going to set that aside. I'm going to cut out this labyrinth. So children's books are a great source for collage materials of all kinds. And libraries, used books, they often have lots and lots of well-loved children's books for sale very inexpensively. Excuse me. All right. And I love the story about the Minotaur in the labyrinth and the young man who had to go and slay the Minotaur in order to win the hand of his beloved, a princess. I can't remember all their names right now. And she was the one that had the idea to pull the string with him into the labyrinth so he could find his way back out. All right, so I'm feeling like I'm going to want some paint on these pages. I've got some little bit of hanging over pieces left from yesterday, so let's just trim those off. So I ended up really loving this page, how it came out once it dried, and I let it sit. Love this page too from yesterday. And yesterday, the last couple of days, working on the dragonfly page, all about change. And one of the other journaling prompts in that little book I had found was, how will you share your light with others? And I thought that was such an inspiring question. And certainly one of the ways I do that personally is through my art, but also through my voice. And so finding my roar is an important thing. No, Georgia, you can't come hang out. So I had mentioned before that sometimes working in this, she's insisting on getting in my lap, in this hardbound journal that is super old and not really intended for a lot of wet media, the pages can really split. So this one is a little bit split from the other side. So again, I'm just going to reinforce these pages with some of this awesome paper tape. And it's twice as hard to make art with a cat in your lap. I'm just saying. Small packages of cotton cloth to attempt making a book with different stitches. I love that. And there's actually on Skillshare, which I really like. It's a really affordable way to get a lot of those basic skills. There's a couple of great videos on Skillshare with different types of stitches, but I'm sure on YouTube you could find some free videos to show you a variety of different types of stitches. Walmart actually had some really nice little stitched kits, and I also did a couple of those. One was a mandala design and some flowers, and that was a fun way to just get back into practice. They were just little small designs, but it was a great way to practice. You're not helping. So I lost a chunk of the page here, so I can use this paper tape to repair a lot of things. And I just want to kind of bring that page back a little bit just so that I'm not bleeding over on the other page. So we'll just take a second to do a little repair. It'll help keep this journal strong and my pages won't fall out at some point in the future. So I'm kind of looking here at the palette. So interesting. These ended up being a similar palette. And I'm liking these sort of, neutral earthy tones. And there's a little bit of that burnt sienna in there. So I'm going to see what I can find. I know I don't have kind of one of those nice earthy blues, so I might have to do a little blending. Bear with me for a second. So I might see if I can get a little bit of Payne's Gray out of here. There's some raw sienna and that nickel azo gold, which I love. Definitely time to replenish some of my paints. And I have been addicted to this gorgeous Naples yellow lately. But what I'm missing are some nice indigo blues. So I have a high flow indigo. So I might have to add something else to that to darken it up. Oh, there's a different Payne's Gray, which is kind of a bluey gray, and every brand of Payne's Gray is just a little bit different from the other. So Georgia, you're really not helping. And I kind of like this dark turquoise. So I have a variety of colors here, and I'm going to start by just getting some color down on the page. Get those needles out of the way. I don't think I want that yellow. I'm looking for kind of a more sort of solid background. So I probably have way more color than I need here. So let's try a little bit of that burnt sienna, and maybe we're going to darken it up. Now Georgia's trying to steal my glue stick. She loves glue sticks and pens. She's quite the thief at knocking things off the table. All right, go find something else to play with besides me. And I'm just going to take my handy dandy scraper. My catalyst wedge has disappeared, I think, onto the other table. And I just want to get some color. So I already gessoed this page. And because I'm working on this inexpensive paper, it buckles and it ripples. And so there's a lot of texture on the page, which makes for interesting texture in the paint as well, where it sort of settles in or doesn't settle in. And I love that color kind of brings out those oranges in my piece here. So this is definitely the direction I want to go, but I think I want it to be maybe a little bit landscapey with these orangey colors at the bottom and then some of those more blue colors at the top, and just kind of see what happens. So getting all that paint off of there. And then I'm going to come in. My brush is a little bit wet because I want to just be able to move that paint around a little bit more. But working in old books like this, the thing to remember is that you don't want to get the pages overly wet because they are pretty fragile and they will And trying to not let them get stuck together either because they rip pretty easily. So they will not stay together. All right, so just getting a little bit of that color down. And I'm wondering if this turquoise is going to be too blue, but maybe I can just mix it with just a little bit of that fluid indigo. I love images of labyrinths of all kinds. And remember when you start to just, ooh, those mix really cool together. They kind of stayed separate a little bit. So I'm getting some of both on there, which is interesting. But mixing your own colors is another way to start to get that really original look to a piece when you're not using colors right out of a tube. I tend to do more of that when I'm working on canvas. I have a huge mandala that I started that's over on my easel that was inspired by one of my son's Connor's designs, and so I'm having a lot of fun with that and mixing my own colors. Again, that's a little bluer. What I notice here, these are a little purpley, but it's probably close enough for what it is that I want to create here. And I'm thinking I'm going to want something different in that labyrinth, maybe even a picture of myself or definitely a picture of a woman and not this creepy minotaur kind of looking off into the distance. Again, just come back in with just a little bit that brush, getting that paint all the way to the edges because that's really what's going to show. And again, this is an example also of just working on a different surface. And the more that we explore different surfaces, the more we learn what we love as well and what we don't love. And so I'm just noticing what this paper does. It's really different, right? It's really interesting. All right. So now I can kind of start to get an idea of where on earth am I going with this crazy page. Like this was too big to fit on the labyrinth. So, but I do want them. There's something about having them be a little bit layered that feels important, almost like I don't know if the lion has come in or come out, but I'm just curious and thinking definitely there needs to be more going on around the edges. What if these weren't connected and they were maybe two different parts of a story? What I'm feeling is I want to glue this one down and then come in with my white Posca and just add some patterns around the edges and keep this page pretty simple. And then when this one's dry, I'm going to hand stitch this piece of burlap into this directly into the journal page, or I might even take it over and do it on my sewing machine. But I really love the thickness of the embroidery floss. So this one's going to get saved for later because that page needs to get really dry. And it would be boring to sit here and watch me just slow stitching that in there, but I'll show the finished version of that. And I'm going to focus a little bit on this guy. And where I want to go, so I'm thinking about maybe looking through some of my boxes of images, and I want something to go in the center of that labyrinth. So I have a couple of things just floating around here. So I'm taking a look to see if anything just sort of stands out. Funny old picture of Marlon Brando. But I'm really feeling like I want the picture of a woman in the center. She's too big. I love the mindfulness. It's a picture of the author Gabby Bernstein. So this is maybe a little more of the effect I'm going to. And I even like those words, deep in love. And I love creating intuitive collage pieces because the story unfolds as I go. And so I started off talking about this idea of reconnecting to ourself and our identity, how we can get stuck in these places where we're looking in the mirror going, I don't know who I am. I hear from a lot of people I've lost my voice, I've lost my identity, I've lost my courage. What happened to that, courageous 20 something who was going to take on the world? And she's still there. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of excavating and traveling through the labyrinth. Look at that. She's even the same colors. Traveling through the labyrinth to find that core of ourself. And that is a way, the only way to really find ourselves is to deepen love, to deepen self love, especially. And this is the primary work that I do with my private clients is take them on a deep discovery into the center of themselves to reconnect to their values and their purpose, to feel like they can courageously strike out on whatever's next. So, what's really curious to me right now is that I've got this sort of meditative, mindful, deep in love circling into the labyrinth. And then I have really the complement to that, which is this find your roar. But I have to go here first before I can be here and sharing my voice and my light out with others. So interesting to just notice the contrast between these two. Um, Great question, Blanca, about what's the point of using gesso. And so most of the time, if you buy canvas these days, it's already primed and doesn't need to be primed. And in this particular case, Yvonne is right. It's all about making the page stronger. So when you prime a page, it just makes a surface on the page that'll hold more wet media. Um, if I didn't put that gesso down, you can see where maybe the gesso was thinner, then my water and my paint will start to bleed through the page. So the point of the gesso is just to make that page, especially when you're working in old pages like this. I even do it sometimes if I'm working on like sketch paper or, a lighter weight mixed media paper, because I do like to add so many layers. I want that page to be as strong as possible. So you can see this page is, pretty flimsy. And because I'm going to stitch on this one, it's probably going to get glued over here to a second page as well, to just also, that's another way when you're working in old books to make the pages stronger, is take some matte medium or even just a glue stick and glue a couple of sheets of paper together. And even then I would still add that layer of gesso. This one also had a lot of words on it, and I wanted to push that back and have more of a blank surface. So gesso is great for priming and sealing pages. It's also great, like you said, for painting over things, but mostly it's for increasing the integrity of the surface so that it doesn't completely disintegrate. Okay, so I'm going to come in with some matte medium and get these images down. I'm sort of fascinated here by the quick story that's evolving. And I'm almost to the end of this jar of matte medium. So this is a pretty thick piece of nice glossy paper. So I'm going to want to put matte medium down both on the surface of my page and the back of my image. And that's just going to help me get it glued down. And it's going to be a little bit tricky to get this one smooth on the page as well, just because my paper underneath is pretty wrinkly. And so I'm going to use my hand to first really smooth that out there. I might even come in with a clean brayer and really roll that down, and we'll see how good a job we can do to really get under the edges of this and to get it smoothed out on the page. Might take a little bit of extra elbow grease. I've also still got some paint on the edge of this scraper. So I'm really pressing to get that down on there. If I want to paint over it, if I just don't want it to fold later, I want to get that down there. I did leave this piece loose. This is the center fold of the book, and so I'm going to want that piece there probably to maybe bend a little bit easier. All right, and I'm just scraping off that extra matte medium on the page. And I'm going to get some matte medium down on Miss Bernstein here. And here I'm just starting on the back of the image, but I'm putting it on pretty thick. I love getting my fingers into the process. We'll get her on the page, cover up that minotaur. And I tend to sort of start from the center with either my finger or the scraper and work my way out. So from the center of the image and work my way out. And that helps me to avoid getting too many bumps. Magazine pages are often quite thin. They can tear easily, but they also wrinkle a lot. And so you got to be gentle with them if you don't like the wrinkles. Usually I'm okay with those wrinkles. And I just let them be, but kind of liking this smooth surface. And if I didn't want this to be Gabby, no, that's okay. You're not taking me away. That's what I'm here for, is to answer those questions. Totally fine. I love, love, love your questions. And you know me, I'm just rambling on here. So I'm going to get a little of that matte medium on the top because I'm looking at her going, if I don't want this to be recognizable as Gabby Bernstein, by putting the matte medium over here, I'm sealing the surface of that image, just like I could do with gesso. So matte medium is like a primer without pigment added to it. I think it's the binders that they put into acrylic paint, basically. I could paint her over and make her my own, but in this case, I'm not feeling the need to do that. This is for me only, right? So, obviously I'm using magazine images. These are copyrighted images. I couldn't turn around and try to sell this, but that's not my intention. My intention is to just tell that personal story here of that sort of circling in. And I love when pages come together pretty fast and pretty simply. So we have this simple page here. Did not get that on very straight. So funny, I always say I'm not a perfectionist, and then every once in a while there's just that, little thing that it's like, no, that does, it needs to be just a little bit better. But I've got this simple page here, simple palette. It came together with this story pretty fast. And again, the only way to get to know ourselves better is to be in that energy of deepening love and deepening relationship with ourselves, which requires us to go within before we can come back out and share that voice with the world. And what happened to my, there it is. I'm feeling somehow like I really want this, have some pattern around this labyrinth. So I'm coming in with my Posca, just making an effort to make sure that I'm not drawing over wet matte medium, because that would 100% ruin the tip of this brand new Posca marker. This is one of my favorite Zentangle patterns, poke leaf, sort of a quickie version of poke leaf. But I think about, okay, there was some matte medium still there. I think about labyrinths tend to be in gardens or beautiful natural places. Obviously, the Greek myth with the one of the Minotaur was underground somewhere, but most of the time, labyrinths are above ground. One of my friends, Christine, who has Philosophers Camp, an amazing experience. She's building a gorgeous labyrinth on her property in Santa Barbara. When we lived there, there was one on the bluffs, all made out of stones, that was overlooking the ocean, so you could walk the labyrinth up on the bluffs above the ocean. That was one of my favorite places to go. So let's see if that white is going to show. I think it'll show just enough down here. So again, there's this idea of growth on the page, right? Things are growing and moving. For me, connection to nature is the place where I love to go deep within. And again, this just adding these patterns, it's mindful. You can hear I'm getting quiet because I'm getting caught up in just the drawing of the patterns. Being here with myself on the page is a form of self-love and what I consider to be self-care. I need this time. For exploration, and so often we don't give ourselves the gift of time. So I'm rereading a fabulous book right now called Essentialism, which is almost an anti-productivity book. It's all about what he calls less but better, and learning to lean into discernment, to make different choices, to say no to things, so that we're giving our time and attention to the most important things. And this is one of those most important things, is my relationship with myself and my art and being here on the page. So I'm pretty happy with how this page came together and the colors. And I'm excited to decide where I want to go with this page as well. And I am looking here. So I don't know that that's enough contrast with that burlap. That's too blue. So maybe something a little more goldy. So that one's pretty close, but I'm looking for what's the thing that's going to really stand out on that burlap and we're going to be able to see it. I could also go with something quite a bit darker or even quite a bit brighter. Oh, the blue's kind of fun. There's some dark brown as well. Hard choice. I'm really kind of liking that dark brown. So I think that's what I'm going to go with. So the next stage for me, and I'll probably do this while I'm sitting watching TV tonight, is going to be to do just a couple of edges of straight stitching around the sides of my lion here and literally stitch him directly into the page. And again, I'm really pleased with how the story is unfolded, right? Around first, I have to go within, and then I'll have that opportunity to come without after I have spent the time here to reconnect and rediscover who I am. So I think that's it for today. I will be doing some more stitching, and maybe tomorrow I'll bring a couple of little pieces of fabric and show you how I might get started with just creating some little small pieces of slow stitching that then I could incorporate into a page. I notice that once I start stitching, I often don't want to stop, so maybe I'll continue on that journey here for a couple of days with some mindful stitching in my journal. So this is a fun way to add texture by combining fabric and thread directly into our visual journal pages, as well as paint and images. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan. This is Painting in Your PJs live with Minette. Be sure to give this video a like so we can encourage others to come along and play with us on Painting in Your PJs live. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Mountain Time. Have an amazing rest of your day.